Welcome to the Rehab Files, where we discuss all things rehabilitation through to finding your capacity and exploring your abilities. So first, let's start with what on earth is a rehab counsellor and what is it that we actually do? And also why it matters. So if you've ever introduced yourself as a rehab counsellor, you've probably seen the look on someone's face that says, so you deal with addiction. Or last week, someone had said to me, you have no business working in mental health. Or even sending through an invoice today, I had a plan manager come back to me about what that sort of looks like to say that it wasn't, I guess, acceptable, despite that it's specifically a profession in the NDIS price guide. So what I wanted to speak about as a foundation for the Rehab Files is explaining what a rehab counsellor actually does. So let's go through a few kind of truths and myths. So rehabilitation counsellors are one of the most misunderstood yet valuable professions in disability employment and the mental health ecosystem. So let's break down what we actually do, why it matters, and how we fit beautifully into the NDIS landscape. So rehabilitation counsellors, myth number one is that we would only work in addiction. So not even close. While some people can work with alcohol and other drug settings, the profession is much broader. Rehabilitation is grounded in a biopsychosocial approach, which means we look at things like a person functioning, their environment and their capacity, their goals, their barriers, their strengths, and how that ecosystem around them is actually interacting with each other to be producing the best results for the person that we're working with. We support people to build their skills, confidence, and psychological readiness, and they need to participate in life, whether that's working, study, community, relationships, or well-being. Whilst addiction is one tiny part of the corner in a very large room, I wanted to also speak about a little around the difference between a counsellor, because that seems to be a bit of a context at the moment. So a counsellor, and yes, I'm dual registered with my ASOC registration and my ACA registration. So a counsellor is often taught that they would work person-centred in a way that is what that person brings, what they would like to talk about, the pace that they would like to talk about things, and it explores and goes kind of where that person wants it to go, right? So potentially you might have a treatment plan, and it might be that we have got all these other things that we would like to work on the treatment plan, but then your participant or your client comes in and wants to talk about something completely different. And as a counsellor, we go where that goes, right? And as a rehabilitation counsellor, there's a way that we would work where, yes, our conversations can be counselling based, but it is so much more than that in looking at how, our stakeholders are engaging with each other, how our progress is going. Do we need to look at a stakeholder meeting? How do we potentially speak to another either allied health practitioner or a medical professional if we feel that we're not being heard? There's a little bit of the advocacy that comes into the work we do. There's sort of some case management aspects in making sure that things are kind of happening in time for people. There's just so much more, I would say, holistic assessments and that biopsychosocial model, more so than when a counsellor works with someone and just directly what that person is speaking to them about. So it really is, I think currently, to my knowledge in Australia, there's just La Trobe that are offering the dual registration. So as a rehab counsellor personally, I have found it a little limiting, and I did go back and finish the other year of the Masters so that I could have the dual registration, so that there's a little part where I can work therapeutically and I do it with the equine assisted therapy space. But there's also more that I bring to those sessions than what a counsellor would bring, not to make us sound like we've kind of got a God complex or we're better than any other profession. It's just that we work quite differently. So myth number two, getting on with it. Rehab counsellors aren't working with mental health. This one pops up far too often. So rehabilitation counsellors are trained in counselling, behaviour intervention, psychosocial assessments, adjustment to injury, illness or disability, vocational rehabilitation, case management, the evidence-based therapeutic approaches, stakeholder engagement and coordination. We work with people who are experiencing anxiety, depression, trauma, psychosocial disability, chronic illness, life transitions, life changes, loss of function. For me, it's a really big one. I guess those identity changes, workplace injury, and barriers to employment. Myth number 3 is that rehab counsellors don't have a place in the NDIS. So this one couldn't be further from the truth. Rehabilitation counsellors are perfectly positioned to support NDIS participants, especially those with psychosocial disability or complex barriers. And here's where we shine in the NDIS space. Psychosocial recovery coaching, skill building, capacity development, work readiness, vocational planning, behavioural and environmental strategies, adjustment to disability, goal setting, future planning, and we work quite holistically and person-centred in our support. We help people move forward from where I don't know where to start to I can see a path forward. So from some of my background working in a space where I worked with people who were deemed totally permanently disabled within their education, training and experience for what that specific policy was, what I found was that often people had been told, by the time they've kind of been through a work cover scheme and compensation schemes and potentially have got lawyers and those things, is that people are being told that they can't ever work again, or your back's so bad, there's nothing I can do to help you. Sometimes what I say is if you're going to see a specialist and what they specialised in, they'll want to offer you that solution that they're skilled in. For me, the ability as a health practitioner to refer on, one, it's what you would do as a counsellor, but two, can be a little egotistical in the space. And, my colleagues listening would agree with that. To say, hey, look, like maybe you actually just need an EP referral, exercise physiology, which we can get into on a later episode. So, when people come to see a rehab counsellor, quite often we have had so many people tell us we can't do that anymore. And it's because the systems that we work in are proving incapacity. Even NDIS is proving incapacity. There's people who receive a report for their functional capacity assessment, they submit and apply for their NDIS, and it looks like you're an absolute write-off and you'll never be successful in anything. It's a point-in-time assessment. Sometimes these people are doing these assessments because they're looking at it from a lens of what does this person need at this point in time if nothing was to change moving forward. So where we come in as a rehab counsellor, it's like, but what can you do, right? And we want to build a life forward and a path forward based on what your abilities are. Yes, there's 12 people before you that have told you everything that you can't do, but we're here to talk about what you can do and build a life around that. And one of the ways that I start working with people is actually just how do we build joy back into our life? Because we have to be feeling good and kind of okay about ourselves if we're ever going to take a big giant leap forward. So the next one is that we do this in a way that blends counselling, rehabilitation science, practical, and in a real world kind of strategy. So why does this actually matter? Because people deserve to understand the value of a profession that quietly holds together the bridge between mental health, disability, and meaningful participation. Rehabilitation counsellors don't just help people get back to work, we help people rebuild identity, confidence, capacity, and hope. In systems like NDIS, where participants often fall through the cracks, our role is more important than ever. So let's keep the conversation going. Curious about how rehabilitation counsellors work, how we support NDIS participants, how we build functional capacity, how we blend counselling and practical rehabilitation, or how we help people become work ready, life ready, and confident again. Reach out to me if you've got any ideas around further kind of podcast episodes that you would like to hear more about. This is our foundational kind of pilot one to explain what our role actually does so that then I can build all of the other episodes beyond this kind of starting point.